Hey folks, this is Pecktec, and I'm taking over Quack Co, the channel where every video is 10 minutes or less. I guarantee it will be less. Today I wanted to do a tip about one of my new favorite board games. That's DEI, or Divide et Impera. Now, I've already taken my base game box and kind of checked it. Well, not really. I put it in my attic where I store all my boxes that I'm not using because I can't bear to throw them away. So these little visual aids here are just some expansion boxes. DEI is a snowpocalypse game that is largely area control, and there's a few things to know about it. So with DEI, throughout the game you're going to be purchasing cards. And it seems like something that's sort of, it seems like an expense that maybe is not as justified to purchase these cards. But remember that every card that you purchase comes with some points. And those points really accumulate at the end of the game. In fact, the very last turn of DEI, you really want to make sure, well, let me roll back a little bit. Okay, so each turn of DEI ends with having to fulfill an objective to get some points. That's going to be really your main way to get points, but really it only represents about half of it. So you want to make sure you kind of lock that objective in, or the best you can, because things change quite a lot. You want to try to get that objective or start moving towards that objective, but the entire time, every turn, you want to be purchasing cards too. Because at the end of the game, you're going to count up the points from those cards. And so many times, you will end up with more points from your cards than you did from the objectives. So don't forget to include that in your strategy. The other thing is, try not to plan too far ahead and then get locked into a strategy. With DEI, things tend to shift and turn quite a lot. The plan you had for your strategy 2 plays in, when 2 other people have had their turn, probably will not work. So very much with DEI, I've found that you're going to have to be making some on-the-fly decisions. Just be sure to bake in a couple of things, or make sure you have a contingency plan. Don't get so railroaded into one particular strategy that you're caught unawares when everything kind of just gets messed up by somebody else getting in your way. A key component in DEI is getting in the other person's way. So it's going to be real important that you're able to be flexible and find other ways to make your points. DEI has a number of different factions that came with it. In fact, what is this called? The White Death box. This is an expansion that came with the Kickstarter, and it's basically the Kickstarter exclusives content. And inside of it contain a lot of other factions that really stretch the rule set that came with the core box. My other advice to you is, in your beginning games, in your first I would play the game at least 3 or 4 times before I even took a look at any of these factions. They're all so different and so unusual compared to the core game experience that probably they would probably kind of muddle up the way you think about this game. The other thing to think about, there is an expansion called Cash and Rads, which has 2 other factions, and they tend to play a little bit more like the core set. So if you're going to add some extra expansions and stuff, maybe don't seek this one out so much as the Cash and Rads expansion. There are a lot of other expansions that do other things, and because it's a relatively new game that I've only had for a few months, I haven't explored all of it. But those are a few tips that I've found really, really helpful. The other thing that I like to do, especially on my channel, is I paint. And I've painted all of these things. They take really well with contrast paint. And the small details and stuff, contrast paint really makes it, or speed paint if you go with the other brand that's very similar. They make short work of all those little details. These guys are around maybe 10 millimeter, maybe 11 millimeter. If you play Warhammer 40K, that's generally sort of a 28 millimeter scale. These things are tiny. Like if you have Ennis or something like that, they're all about that size. They're very small, but they're very detailed. and the contrast paint will go on there. It shades it. It keeps them from looking too dirty or anything like that, and you can whip through these things pretty quick. To paint these things, what I did with mine is I took your standard little painting handle and I put a popsicle stick across the top, and I added a little bit of that, some sticky stuff. What is that called? Blue tack. I added some blue tack all across the top, and I just kind of put my little guys down, and I could paint 7 at once. So it'd be like shoes, 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 pants, pants, pants. And to mix it up, like I'll paint all of their hair colors something different. So they all have the same uniform, which keeps it really quick and makes it easier to do. But you could change their hair color, or maybe a shirt or something here and there, depending on what the faction is. And you can really get kind of a wide variety and maybe make it look like it's a bunch of different people and not just the same guy all over the place. With DEI, really they have their scrappers, which are their little worker people, and then you have one leader. So you've got one kind of unique character, and everybody else is just sort of the same. So you can knock out a painting of you can paint all of DEI in probably about a month or so, like regular kind of nightly activities and stuff. I think I painted all of the core box and the extra stuff in right around 2 months, dedicating maybe just an hour or two every other day at my paint table. It was a lot of fun to put together. The drones were probably the most fun to paint. It's a really fascinating game. Oh, the other thing with this is it comes with a lot of boards to put together. All DEI's board basically has to be assembled. It's a snowpocalypse board, and what you have is you've got this basic square, which they call a block, and on top of it, you're going to be putting layers of board that end up representing the buildings that are kind of coming up out of the snow. Because in DEI, everything's snowed over. It's a snowpocalypse. Everything's completely covered, and the buildings are just barely poking out of the top. And your scrappers are going around looking for resources on top of the buildings and around the buildings, and just kind of going through London and trying to find these little bits and pieces. But assembling those boards, you need to be particularly careful to make sure that when they come with a bunch of little double-sided tape stickers, and what you're going to be doing is just sort of assembling these cardboard pieces. They come all unassembled. You're going to have to set aside some time for that. So if you're going to play a game at DEI here in the next that evening, be sure to set aside a couple of hours I'd say at least an hour and 45 minutes to put all these things together. And be very careful when you do that all the cardboard stays within the region so that they don't kind of bump up against each other and leave big gaps when you put it together. It's not really a lot of trouble, but it's a little bit more involved than your typical board game that you pull out. And the look of the board game when it's all assembled and everything else is well worth the effort. Thank you so much for tuning in. This has been Sean Peck reporting for Quack Co.